Cold, hungry, drenched in rain, Lena dragged her trembling body through the crowded streets, invisible to the people rushing past. She had no family, no home, not even a friend to whisper her pain to. The world treated her like a shadow, something to step around and forget. She pressed her thin hands against her chest, trying to hold in the ache of hunger gnawing at her stomach. Every doorway she tried was slammed shut, every shopkeeper's glare told her she didn't belong. She never begged for money, she never stole, but tonight the cold was harsher than pride. Tonight, she needed shelter, even if it meant lowering herself to the most unthinkable plea. Her eyes caught a glow at the far end of the street. It wasn't the dim yellow of streetlights or the flicker of restaurants, it was a grand brightness, a mansion lit like a palace. She stumbled toward it, shoes soaked, hair sticking to her pale face. When she reached the gates, she froze. There, beside the polished driveway, stood a doghouse so large it could fit her curled-up body with room to spare. Its walls gleamed with varnished wood, its roof carved with elegant tiles. Inside, a pampered golden retriever lay stretched on velvet bedding, warmer than she had been in months. For a moment, Lena's heart cracked, not from jealousy, but from despair. Even a dog was given dignity she could only dream of. Her lips quivered as she whispered to herself, "If only I could be like him for one night." Desperation pushed her to the gate. The guard scowled, ready to drive her off like every other stranger, but her words stopped them. With a voice breaking from fear and hope, she begged, "I don't want money. I don't want food. Please, just let me stay in the doghouse tonight. I'll be silent. I'll leave before sunrise. I just need a corner where the rain can't touch me." The guard stared, dumbfounded. They had seen beggars ask for coins, scraps, or even clothes, but never had they heard someone plead for the shelter of a dog. One muttered under his breath, "This girl is mad." Another shook his head, certain their employer would never allow such a thing. As they prepared to shoo her away, a deep, commanding voice cut through the night. "What is happening here?" The guard stiffened, and Lena turned her head slowly. Standing in the glow of the doorway was a man dressed in sharp elegance, his presence radiating authority. Adrian Cole, the mansion's owner, the man the city whispered about, a millionaire with a frozen heart. He had built empires, bought companies, and shattered rivals, all without the slightest crack of compassion. The rich bowed to him, the poor cursed his name. Yet now his piercing eyes rested on the trembling figure before his gates. Lena lowered her gaze, ashamed to meet the stare. The guard tried to explain, "Sir, she was asking to sleep in the doghouse." A smirk curled on Adrian's lips. The doghouse? He stepped closer, rain sliding off his umbrella. "Of all things you could ask for, you choose that." Her knees weakened, but her voice, though faint, was steady. "Because it is more than I have. I don't need your bed, your food, or your pity. Just a roof, even if it belongs to your dog. I can endure hunger. I cannot endure the cold tonight." The silence that followed was heavier than the rain. The guards expected him to laugh, to mock her foolishness, to order them to drive her away. Lena herself braced for rejection, preparing to shuffle back into the storm. But then, Adrian's expression shifted. His sharp eyes softened just enough to reveal something buried deep, an old memory, a wound hidden from the world. "You would lower yourself to a dog's place just to survive?" His voice was calm, almost unreadable. She nodded once, tears pooling but refusing to fall. Adrian drew in a long breath, then shocked everyone with his answer. "No. You will not sleep in the doghouse tonight." He paused deliberately, watching her face fall, then added, "You will sleep inside my home." Gasps slipped from the guards. Lena's lips parted, her body trembling not from cold but from disbelief. She stammered, inside. No, I cannot, but he raised his hand. Enough. If you are willing to beg for less than nothing, then you deserve more than you can imagine. That night, for the first time in years, Lena stepped across a threshold where warmth greeted her instead of rejection. The marble floor beneath her feet felt unreal, the chandeliers too bright for her weary eyes. The staff whispered, confused by their master's mercy, but obeyed his command to bring food and blankets. She sat at the edge of a grand table, staring at dishes she had only seen through restaurant windows. Her hands shook as she lifted the spoon, eating slowly, each bite tasting of disbelief. Adrian watched from across the room, arms folded, his face unreadable. He did not speak, but his gaze never left her. After dinner, she was led to a small guest room. The bed felt like a cloud, the blanket heavy with warmth. Yet even as she lay down, sleep did not come easily. She feared this was a dream that would vanish by morning. She feared kindness could not be real. Curling into herself, she whispered into the silence, "Why me?" In another part of the mansion, Adrian stood by the window, staring into the storm. His mind replayed her trembling figure at the gate, her humble plea for a dog's shelter. He saw in her what few ever saw in him, the reflection of his own past, the boy he once was, shivering in rain with nowhere to turn. He had buried that boy long ago, under layers of wealth and power. But tonight, that memory returned, carried by a girl who had asked for nothing but dignity. The mansion slept, but two souls lay awake, one wondering if kindness was a trick, the other realizing that perhaps, after years of silence, his heart had spoken again, and so began a story that no one on that street, no one in that city, and not even Lena herself could have imagined. A poor girl who begged for a doghouse, and a millionaire who answered with something that would shock everyone, including himself. Lena woke to the sound of birds outside the window, sunlight spilling across sheets softer than anything she had ever touched. For a moment she lay still, afraid to move, half certain she would be thrown out as soon as she stepped beyond the door. But when she finally gathered the courage, the staff greeted her with polite nods, some even with faint smiles. They had been told she was free to stay, at least for now. She carried herself with humility, offering to sweep floors and wash dishes in exchange for food. At first, the servants dismissed her, but when they saw her persistence, they allowed her small tasks. Every corner of the mansion was foreign to her, rooms filled with priceless art, long halls that seemed endless. Yet Lena treated every object with respect, as though it belonged to another world she was only passing through. She ate modestly, always finishing last, always leaving something behind as if she feared taking too much. The dog, Max, became her closest companion. He wagged his tail the moment he saw her, following her steps like a shadow. She often whispered to him about her fears and gratitude, and though he could not reply, his gentle presence comforted her more than any words. Adrian observed quietly. He gave her no promises and offered no explanations, but his eyes lingered on her when she thought no one noticed. He tested her in silence. One morning, a tray with bundles of cash was placed conspicuously on a table near where she was cleaning. Lena barely glanced at it, moving around as if the temptation was invisible. Another time, he had the cook prepare extravagant dishes and instructed them to offer her the first serving. She hesitated, then gently insisted the staff take their share before she touched hers. When a set of designer clothes was brought to her room, she folded them neatly, whispering that she was unworthy of such gifts. Each choice spoke louder than any promise she could have made. The staff, once skeptical, began to admire her. They saw how she never complained, how she rose early to help with tasks that weren't hers, how she never carried bitterness despite her hardships. Gossip outside the mansion grew louder. Some claimed the girl was using Adrian, plotting to steal or manipulate. Others painted her as a secret lover hidden behind the gates. The cruel words reached Lena, cutting into her fragile heart, but she refused to defend herself. She had lived long enough to know silence was sometimes stronger than protest. Adrian, however, did not stay silent. At a charity event, when questioned about the girl, he looked the reporters in the eye and said, "Compassion is not a weakness. If giving someone shelter is scandalous, then let it be." His words shocked many who had only known him as ruthless and unyielding. For the first time, people saw a crack in the armor of the feared millionaire. Late one evening, as Lena sat by the fire with Max's head resting on her lap, Adrian entered the room. The glow of the flames softened his usually stern features. He studied her quietly before speaking, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Do you know why I allowed you inside?" She shook her head. He looked into the fire as if searching for courage. "Because once, I was you." The confession unraveled years of silence. He told her of his childhood, how he too had wandered streets with an empty stomach, how he had begged for help and been treated worse than stray animals. One night, drenched and trembling, he had asked for shelter, and a man had slammed a door in his face. That rejection burned so deeply that he had buried it beneath ambition, building walls of money and power so he would never feel helpless again. But when he saw her at the gate, asking for nothing more than a doghouse, the memory tore through him. "I could not repeat the cruelty I once endured," he said. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "I will never forget what you've given me." He nodded once, then asked what her true dream was. She hesitated, but at last admitted, to study. To work honestly. To live with dignity, not charity. For a long moment he was silent, then spoke words that changed her life. "Then let me be the one to open that door for you." From that day, her journey transformed. Adrian sponsored her education, enrolling her in schools she never imagined entering. She studied with fierce determination, driven not only by her own dreams but by a burning desire to honor the faith placed in her. She faced mockery from some classmates, whispers that she did not belong, but she never wavered. Every night she reminded herself of the rain, the doghouse, and the man who had lifted her beyond it. Years passed, and Lena blossomed. She became a young woman of confidence and grace, armed with knowledge and compassion. She returned to the mansion often, greeting the staff like family, playing with Max as though he were still her first friend. Adrian watched her progress with quiet pride, never boasting, never claiming credit. He remained the same stern figure to the world, but with her, there was always a trace of softness. The day came when Lena achieved her goal. She stood before an audience at a community event, now as a professional who worked to create opportunities for the poor. Cameras flashed, voices hushed, and she began to speak. She told her story, not of poverty alone, but of a night when she begged to sleep in a doghouse and was instead given a chance to change her life. She did not glorify herself, she honored the man who had believed in her when no one else had. "True wealth," she said, her voice trembling, "is not measured by what you keep, but by what you give. He gave me more than shelter, he gave me back my dignity." The audience rose in applause, many with tears in their eyes. Adrian, seated at the back, lowered his head. For years he had hidden every vulnerability, but in that moment, a tear slipped down his cheek. The people who had known him as a man of steel now saw something human, something rare. When the applause faded, Lena walked to him and placed her hand over his. "You saved me," she whispered. "But more than that, you saved the part of yourself you thought was lost." He said nothing, but his grip on her hand was firm, the silence carrying more weight than words. and so the girl who once begged for a dog's shelter had risen beyond the shadows of despair. She built her own future, not by luck, but by the compassion of a man who remembered his own scars. Their story spread, not as gossip, but as inspiration. It reminded people that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, offered at the right moment, could alter a life forever. She had asked for the doghouse, but what she received was a home, a chance, and the priceless gift of hope. And in giving her that gift, the millionaire rediscovered the humanity he thought the world had stolen from him. Together, they proved that even in a world of cold streets and locked doors, compassion still had the power to shock everyone, and to change everything.